I was watching the HOA catering staff pour $200 champagne like it was tap water when I saw Alex Harlan's fingers freeze over his linen napkin. 1 second he's chuckling at a dry joke from Councilman Richard Ellis, the man who basically signs off on every grant that keeps our Pinecrest estates looking like a magazine cover, and the next he's stone quiet. His thumb hovers over his phone like it just delivered a death sentence. I leaned over pretending to adjust my chair, but I knew that face. I'd seen it once before when his wife passed, and he held it together long enough to speak at the memorial only to break down later in the parking lot when no one was looking. This wasn't grief, though. This was insult. Hot, sharp, and tucked inside a cold-blooded text. The Pinecrest Estates annual gala wasn't just some neighborhood potluck. It was the damn Super Bowl for people like us. $200 a seat. Every major player in the subdivision suited up like they were auditioning for a country club commercial. All of us pretending we weren't silently judging each other's lawns, mailbox colors, and who got seated next to the councilman. And Alex Harlan had earned that seat beside Richard with 7 years of quiet dominance. No ego, no drama, just results. He was the guy who showed up when Karen Prescott, our beloved HOA president, slapped a $300 fine on Mrs. Delgado for having her American flag out 3 days past the approved holiday window. Alex fixed it. He was the guy who talked the board out of finding old Mr. Kowalski for grass that was technically 3.2 inches instead of the sacred 3.0. Alex fixed that too. And now he looked like someone had sucker punched him in the middle of a cathedral. Before I go any further, do me a small favor. If you've ever been fined by your HOA for something as stupid as the wrong shade of beige on your shutters, hit that like button and subscribe. It keeps stories like these alive. And trust me, this one gets brutal. Anyway, I watched Alex blink once. Then again. He set the phone down, exhaled, and laughed. Not loudly, not bitterly, just that quiet laugh a man lets out when the world finally confirms what he suspected all along. That loyalty means nothing when a Karen with a clipboard thinks bylaws make her God. He didn't say a word, didn't cause a scene, just took a sip of his sparkling water and went back to cutting into his overpriced filet like he hadn't just been knifed in public. I couldn't see the message yet, but I felt the shift in him. Like some part of him had just turned off and another had turned on. A few seats down, Linda Prescott, our HOA president, blonde helmet hair, pearl necklace tight enough to choke a small animal, was chatting up the hedge fund guy who sponsored the new playground, totally oblivious to the bomb she just dropped. Alex's whole posture changed. Not slouched, not stiff, just silent like a man who knew exactly how to weaponize calm. And Councilman Ellis, mid-sentence about next year's grant funding, noticed. "Everything all right, Alex?" he asked, voice low and casual, but laced with the authority of someone used to being the smartest guy in the room. Alex didn't answer right away. He picked up his phone, tapped it twice, and slid it across the linen tablecloth toward Richard. For a split second, I saw the screen before Ellis turned it. Effective immediately, your role as community liaison is terminated. Details to follow. Return all HOA access cards and documents by Monday. That was it. No signature, no context, just a one-liner gut punch delivered between the lobster bisque and the jazz quartet playing Fly Me to the Moon. Ellis stared at it, then slowly set down his champagne flute. His jaw didn't drop. His eyebrows didn't even flinch. He just nodded, once like a judge reading a guilty verdict he'd seen coming for months. Then, without breaking eye contact with the screen, he muttered, "She did this during my gala." Alex, still cool as ever, shrugged. Guess I was too effective to fire quietly. Ellis didn't answer. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his own phone. And right then, I knew Linda hadn't just screwed over a guy who'd saved her board more times than she could count. She just pissed off the man who controls 42% of our annual HOA budget through city grants. And the funniest part? No one else at the table noticed. They were still laughing at some story about quarterly lawn inspections and the new approved holiday light schedule, while a slow, invisible bomb had just been armed between 2 glasses of Burgundy. I watched the text land. I saw it hit Alex in real time. His eyes went flat like someone turned off the lights behind him. We had just finished some ridiculous kale foam on a cracker they were calling an amuse-bouche when Alex's phone buzzed again. One look, and his entire soul shifted behind the veil of his face. I didn't need to see the screen to know it wasn't good. I've known Alex for years. He's the type who keeps everything bottled behind a well-pressed polo and a polite nod. But when he leaned back in his chair, just slightly, like something had knocked the wind out of him, and he was pretending it hadn't, I knew this wasn't just bad. It was betrayal. He tapped the message once, then again, didn't flinch. Just stared at it like a man watching his own obituary get printed. Then, God help her, he chuckled real low, real quiet, like a man who just realized the joke wasn't on him anymore. I leaned closer, whispering, "Everything okay?" He didn't even look at me, just said, "Depends who you ask." Then he showed me the message. One line. No salutation, no warning, no explanation. Effective immediately. Your role as community liaison is terminated. Details to follow. Return all HOA access cards and documents by Monday. I felt a breath leave my body like someone had yanked it from my chest. And the name at the top, Linda Prescott. Of course, it was that pearl-clutching, PowerPoint-obsessed president who had called Alex a rogue element undermining board authority in last month's closed session. Like Alex hadn't been the reason we even kept our city grants in the first place. I blinked. She fired you by text. Alex nodded, picking up his glass of sparkling water like it was any other Tuesday, and not the night he'd just been publicly executed at the table of the councilman whose grants kept our perfect lawns green, while seated next to the very man who could pull every dollar out of the HOA's budget with one phone call. "I guess you didn't want to wait till Monday," Alex muttered. Shame. I already picked out my retirement flagpole. I could have screamed. Not because he didn't deserve better. He did 100 times over, but because this was so stupidly suburban, so tone-deaf, arrogant, and digital age cruel. A man spends 7 years keeping the peace, negotiating with the city so we don't lose our park funding, and Karen can't even give him a phone call. She can't even look him in the eye. I watched the room spin around us. Laughs, handshakes, clinking glasses. None of them realizing someone had just pulled the pin from the grenade under their own banquet table. Alex checked his phone again, scrolling past the message like it was spam. No severance mentioned, he said calmly, almost like he was noting the weather. That'll be a problem. He wasn't panicking, wasn't sweating, just logging mental notes like a man preparing to dismantle a house with a single wrench. That's when I realized this wasn't going to end with a polite resignation email and a quiet departure. No, Linda had turned it personal. And Alex doesn't yell. He calculates. And from the look in his eye, the math had already started. Councilman Ellis caught it right away. The change in Alex wasn't loud. It was in the shoulders. The kind of stillness that comes when a man's been gutted and refuses to bleed in public. 1 second, he was laughing politely at a story about freight logistics for the new playground equipment. The next, he was quiet, not withdrawn, just aware like something inside him had broken off clean. Ellis leaned slightly across the linen tablecloth, eyes narrowing. "Everything all right?" Alex didn't answer. He just picked up his phone, tapped it once, and slid it across the table like he was passing the check. Ellis looked down at the screen, squinting for a beat before it registered. I watched it hit him like a delayed detonation. His brows didn't shoot up. His lips didn't part. Instead, he slowly, deliberately set down his champagne and stared at the phone like it had just called his mother something vile. "She did this during my gala," he asked, the words so quiet they barely registered over the clinking forks and jazz trio in the background. Alex shrugged. "It's fine. I was already on my way out anyway." Ellis looked at him like he'd lost his damn mind. "Not anymore." "You're not." There was a pause. The kind that makes your skin crawl because you know something seismic just shifted under the table. Even though everyone else is still talking about quarterly lawn inspections and a new approved mailbox color palette like the earth hasn't moved. I don't think I've ever seen Ellis angry before. Not really. The man built half the city's community programs on steel nerves and polished diplomacy. But this wasn't anger. This was offended, and not on behalf of some abstract budget line, but on behalf of Alex. 7 years. Ellis muttered mostly to himself. She fires you by text. At my table. At my event. I could see the heat bloom under his collar. He took the phone again and reread the message like he was trying to memorize it. Then he pulled out his own device and started typing. Thumb swift, mechanical. There wasn't a single ounce of panic in his movement. It was surgical. Dangerous. Alex didn't even look up. There's a clause in the city HOA agreement about primary liaison changes. 30 days notice required. Ellis paused. Clause 12, sub A, he said without looking. Alex blinked. You remember it? I wrote it, Ellis replied, then turned to glance across the ballroom toward Linda, who was still yucking it up with someone from the landscaping committee, completely unaware she'd just flipped a kill switch on her own little empire. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't about a text. This wasn't about HOA protocol or even neighborhood etiquette. This was about respect. And Linda Prescott had just pissed in the wrong man's pool. Ellis didn't yell. He didn't storm off or flip a table or march over to Linda like some puffed-up politician cliché. That would have been too loud, too reactive. No, he went quiet. A surgical kind of quiet. The kind that said, I've killed funding for subdivisions for less than this. His fingers moved fast, texting under the table like he was playing chess on a 5-minute clock. I leaned just enough to catch the preview. One to his chief of staff, another to the city attorney. No drama, just clear signals going out like quiet flares before an airstrike. Meanwhile, laughter rippled through the room around us. Some board member's wife telling a story about her dog's Instagram sponsorships. I think the jazz trio had started a mellow version of Fly Me to the Moon. And you'd never know, watching from the outside, that the ground beneath the entire HOA's grant pipeline was starting to buckle. Ellis lifted the phone to his ear and made a quick call under the table, voice low and measured. They just fired their only credible liaison mid-agreement. He said almost like he was ordering a sandwich. Flag it. I watched Alex pull out his own phone. No longer the stunned victim of a suburban backstab, but something colder, sharper. The man who had kept Pinecrest Estates grant-eligible brick by brick was now flipping through his files like a lawyer prepping for trial. He opened a folder labeled City HOA Agreements, updated, and scrolled fast. So fast I knew he already knew where to look. His thumb stopped on a clause highlighted in yellow. I saw it over his shoulder. Clause 12A. He didn't say anything. Just turned the screen to show me. Any change in primary community liaison without 30-day written notice shall be considered a breach of exclusivity protection subject to grant suspension or full agreement termination. I looked up at him and saw something different. Not hurt, not insult, calculated intent. He wasn't going to rant. He wasn't going to post some passive-aggressive goodbye on the neighborhood Facebook page or beg for dignity in the next board meeting. No, Alex was going to let the agreement bleed them out. He closed the document, locked his screen, and took a long sip of water. His hands were steady, his breathing calm, but his eyes were already 1,000 miles ahead. Across the room, Linda laughed a little too hard at her own joke about those residents who think they're above the rules. No idea, she just triggered a clause that could vaporize the very grants she was bragging about securing. Ellis hung up the call. No expression, no comment. Just nodded once at Alex like a silent pact had been made. I don't think either of them needed to say what came next. Alex leaned back his chair, eyes flicking around the ballroom, cataloging everyone at that table. He wasn't just memorizing the room. He was remembering who watched it happen and who stayed quiet. The first ember of revenge wasn't loud. It didn't come with a speech or slam door. It came in the form of two men quietly reading an agreement while the HOA president prattled on about maintaining our pristine community standards. Alex didn't rush. That was the unnerving part. He moved like a man slicing a wire, not pulling a trigger. Deliberate. Precise. The kind of calm that makes people underestimate you right before they realize you've already won. He scrolled to the top of the agreement PDF and searched Clause 12 like he was looking up a weather report. I watched him skim the language again, even though I knew damn well he had it memorized. Alex never forgot the fine print. He was the kind of guy who remembered handshake terms from 8 fiscal quarters ago, down to the punctuation. He leaned in slightly toward Ellis, voice low but firm. Clause 12, sub A. That text activated it. Ellis's head turned a fraction, just enough to show he'd heard. He didn't look surprised. Just confirmed like he'd been hoping Alex would say it out loud. Thought so, Ellis murmured, eyes already on his phone again. He wasn't texting Linda yet. He was drafting something better. Something legal. Something final. You could feel the stakes shift. This wasn't just an ugly HOA mishap or a rogue president with too much power in her blood. This was contractual breach, an opening clause violation that, if pressed, could void Pinecrest's exclusivity with the city for the next grant cycle. 42% of the HOA budget gone just like that. And all because Linda Prescott couldn't keep her itchy little power fingers off the damn send button. Alex sat back in his chair again. This time not out of shock, but posture, presence, authority he didn't need to announce. He had transformed in the span of 15 minutes from expendable resident to the one man in the room holding the live wire, and letting everyone else wonder how close they were to getting fried. The champagne flute sat untouched in front of him. The lobster course had arrived. No one at the table noticed the quiet war forming between 2 seats. Everyone was still giggling about quarterly inspections and faux stories about their approved holiday lights while Ellis tapped out a message that would hit harder than any boardroom screaming match. Alex turned to me, voice barely above a whisper. You know what Clause 12 also does? I shook my head. It lets the city walk away without penalty. No notice. Just done. It landed like a bullet, not with noise but with weight. He didn't smirk, didn't look for validation. He just exhaled like a man who had finally found a pressure point in the chest of the beast that tried to swallow him. His silence wasn't retreat anymore. It was positioning. A loaded chamber waiting for the trigger. Ellis looked up, read Alex's face one more time, and nodded. Just once. He started typing again, and this time the name at the top of the screen was Linda Prescott. Ellis's thumb hovered over the keyboard for a second longer than usual, as if calibrating the weight of each word. Then, without flourish or warning, he tapped send. Looks like you just voided our agreement too. See you in the next funding cycle. 14 words, polite, surgical, and fatal. The message hit like a silent gunshot. Not dramatic, not loud, but irreversible. You could almost feel the tectonic shift under the ballroom carpet. Even if no one else had a clue what had just detonated, Ellis didn't flinch. He didn't gloat. He just set his phone face down and returned to his lobster like he'd just texted someone about a dry cleaning mishap. A few seconds later, his phone buzzed again. Linda Prescott. What the hell does that mean? He didn't answer. Not even a glance. Just let the question hang in the void where Linda's future used to be. Instead, Ellis opened his inbox. Click compose. To HOA-president at prescottemail.com and CC. Entire board. Subject: immediate suspension of city HOA agreement. Breach triggered. Body: per clause 12A of the Pinecrest Community Agreement, your recent internal decision constitutes a breach of liaison exclusivity. Effective immediately, we are suspending all grant obligations pending legal review. Please direct all further correspondence through counsel. He hit send with a fingertip, so calm you'd think he was RSVPing to a fundraiser. I looked over at Alex. Nothing had changed in his expression. No smugness, no sigh of relief, just the same quiet clinical composure. Like he was watching a building he'd once lived in get demolished, knowing damn well he'd packed his bags weeks ago. That's the thing about Alex. His revenge was never going to be dramatic. It was going to be correct. And that's what made it so lethal. He wasn't yelling across the clubhouse or rage-posting cryptic messages on the neighborhood app. He didn't need to. He let the agreement do it for him. Across the room, Linda was still buried in conversation with some landscaping rep, oblivious to the nuclear blast that had just gone off in her inbox. She had no idea that her little one-line termination had triggered a domino collapse that could rip 8 figures out of the HOA's 5-year plan. And Alex, he didn't even look at her. Didn't need to. He just took another sip of water, pulled out his phone, and opened a message draft from a resident advocacy group that had been sitting in his inbox for 6 days. Subject line, still interested in leading? His finger hovered over the reply button, and he smiled, just barely. Monday hit like a sledgehammer wrapped in legalese. At 8:14 a.m., every Pinecrest apartment head, well, every board member, received the same urgent directive. All city grant-related communications frozen until further notice. Legal escalation in progress. Stand by for instruction. No one in context. Not yet. But panic spreads faster than truth in a suburban chain of command. And by 9 a.m., the clubhouse office was a human ant farm. Emails flying, neighborhood app threads exploding. Assistants on the verge of tears as compliance tore through inboxes like forensic archaeologists. The board lawyers summoned everyone into an emergency Zoom war room. Linda showed up late, coffee in hand, hair still perfect like she'd had a rough Sunday, and from the look at her eyes she had. She tried to play it cool, blamed miscommunication and off-boarding procedures, tried spinning the text as a placeholder for formal notice, said she'd meant to follow up with documentation that somehow got caught in filters. It didn't work. The agreement was too clean, too clear. Clause 12, it wasn't ambiguous. It was spelled out in bold. Any unilateral change to primary liaison without 30-day written notice constitutes a breach. Linda had fired the liaison via text in public without notice in front of the city councilman. And now the golden goose had flown off with the nest egg. The board treasurer looked ready to vomit. Compliance wanted paper trails. The communications chair was already triaging what they were calling a potential city-side optics emergency. Meanwhile, IT was quietly disabling Linda's admin access to the violation database. While the circus spun itself into a procedural nightmare, Alex was nowhere near the clubhouse. He was on his back porch, sipping lukewarm coffee from a chipped mug that said Quarterly Warrior, reading news alerts about Pinecrest Estate's grant status taking a minor hit following unverified board turbulence. He didn't smile, didn't gloat, just scrolled. Then his phone buzzed. LinkedIn-style message from the head of the County Resident Rights Coalition. Saw the Pinecrest drama. Heard you were the glue there. We've got a mess and need grown-ups. Advisory role, executive level. You choose the terms. Interested, Alex stared at it for a second, then clicked over to his calendar. He had time. He typed a response. Available for a call after 2 p.m. Today. NDA first. He hit send, stood up, stretched, and walked back inside like it was just another Monday. No fireworks, no speeches, just a man whose silence had finally become louder than Linda Prescott's entire presidency. That's why Tuesday morning the internal bleeding had gone viral, figuratively, then literally. Someone leaked the text. Not the one Alex got, the one Ellis sent. 14 words, screen-capped, and circulating across the neighborhood app like wildfire. Looks like you just voided our agreement too. See you in the next funding cycle. It was forwarded, memed, dissected. Someone printed it and taped it over the espresso machine in the clubhouse lounge. Investors, well, the homeowners who actually pay the dues, noticed. They always do. By 10:30 a.m., someone on the board had called an urgent alignment session, which was code for who the hell let Linda press the detonate button. Home values dipped, not catastrophically, but noticeably. The kind of wobble that gets whispered about at block parties and triggers carefully worded, "We remain committed to community continuity," post from the PR intern who was definitely not paid enough for this. Inside the HOA office, it was a war zone of open laptops and closed doors. Resignation rumors swirled. People tiptoed past the president's suite like it was radioactive. Neighborhood app threads turned passive-aggressive, then just aggressive. One neighbor posted, FYI, check clause 12A. Hey, if you want to sleep tonight. It got 47 emoji reactions in under 10 minutes. None of them smiley. Linda got pulled into an emergency boardroom session so fast she didn't have time to put on her usual power pearls. She looked like someone had dumped cold water down the back of her blazer, rumpled, clammy, eyes wide. The woman who had swaggered into the gala like a discount real estate queen now sat at the long end of the table, trying to spin the narrative like it was some internal restructuring miscommunication. The lawyer wasn't buying it. The treasurer was livid. The communications chair wouldn't even look at her. Meanwhile, Alex's phone rang, a known number, but the area code was familiar. He answered calmly, knowing exactly who it would be. "Mr. Harlan," said a strained voice on the other end. "This is Greg Thompson, board treasurer of Pinecrest Estates." Alex didn't respond. Greg cleared his throat, trying again. "I just wanted to understand exactly what happened at the gala." Alex kept it simple. "Your president fired me by text while I was seated next to the councilman who controls your funding." The silence that followed could have cracked concrete. Then, quietly, "Is there anything we could do to fix this?" Alex leaned against his kitchen counter, watching steam curl off the surface of his second cup of coffee. Same mug, same porch, same quiet smirk just threatening to break across his face, but never quite forming. "There is," he said, voice flat. "Start by reading your own agreement." Greg started to say something, but Alex cut him off. "And maybe," he added, "read your people before they burn down the house they think they own." He hung up before the treasurer could respond. Then he silenced his phone, grabbed his jacket, and stepped outside because some men get their revenge in court. Others let the paperwork do the screaming. That took 1 week. That's how long it took for the clause Linda hadn't read to carve her name off the brass plaque outside the clubhouse. By Thursday morning, her office was boxed up by interns pretending not to smirk. The board walked her out through the back entrance where a security guard held the door without saying a word. No farewell speech. No, we wish her well in her future endeavors. Just a quiet removal. The kind reserved for people who cost the community 8 figures in suspended grants and made the councilman personally dial the woman they discarded like expired inventory. The official statement read, "Leadership realignment." Internally, everyone knew it was a mercy kill. That same day, the city made their own announcement. A press release, elegant and surgical, blasted across every relevant neighborhood group and local news outlet. Pinecrest Estates is proud to continue its commitment to excellence by entering a strategic partnership with a new resident advisory council led by Alex Harlan. We value continuity, experience, and professional discretion in all our relationships moving forward. The dig was subtle, professional but lethal. Continuity meant we don't drop our anchors mid-grant. Experience meant we prefer people who've survived more than one petty fine cycle. And professional discretion. That was a throat punch in a silk glove, custom stitched with Linda's initials. The advisory group Alex launched, clean, nimble, already stacked with talent Linda had once dismissed as troublemakers, was up and running within 72 hours. 2 other subdivisions quietly reached out. Word travels fast when your exit isn't a tantrum, but a case study in quiet revenge. By Friday night, Alex sat alone in a low-lit bar near the harbor. No entourage, no champagne flutes or neighborhood app victory laps. Just a glass of Scotch neat and a tired smirk reserved for men who didn't need applause to know they'd won. His phone buzzed once. A message from Councilman Ellis. Subject, "Thank you." Message, "We didn't burn the bridge." She blew it up with a text. "We just watched it fall." Alex stared at the screen for a moment. Let it sit. Then he lifted his glass in a slow, silent toast, more to himself than anyone else, and took a long sip. Outside, the world went on. The gala lights had dimmed. The headlines would fade. But somewhere in a half-empty server room at the Pinecrest HOA office, Clause 12, still burned quietly in a PDF file, glowing like a warning flare no one there would ever ignore again. Not because of its wording, but because of the man who used it like a scalpel. And somewhere down the street, Linda Prescott was learning the hardest lesson of suburban power. The rules you weaponize against others have a funny way of turning around and biting the hand that sent the text. She still had her perfect lawn. She still had her approved beige mailbox. But the throne she thought was hers forever, that was gone. And a neighborhood that once feared her clipboard now whispered her name like a cautionary tale. Proof that even the most polished Karen can be undone by the one resident who simply refused to bleed in public. The next Saturday, the flags flew a day longer than the old rules allowed. No one wrote a violation. Mrs. Delgado's porch lights stayed on past the curfew. No fine arrived. And when old Mr. Kowalski let his grass hit 3.2 inches again, the only thing that showed up was a friendly note from the new advisory council. We'll take care of it. Justice didn't arrive with fireworks or screaming matches. It arrived with a text message that backfired so perfectly, even the most die-hard rule followers couldn't help but laugh through the rage. Because in Pinecrest Estates, the real power was never the clipboard. It was the quiet guy who read the fine print and waited. And somewhere in the distance, you could almost hear the champagne glasses of the next Gala clinking in celebration of a neighborhood finally free from the Karen who thought she owned it. The end.